Welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. My guest today is high-end television director Steve Hughes. Steve has directed on some amazing TV series. Some of his credits include Doctor Who, Casualty, Midsomer Murders, Miss Scarlet and the Duke, Death in Paradise and Creeped Out. On today's show, we talk about the benefits of his background in editing, the importance of trusting your cast and crew, directing the award-winning improvised episode of the iconic BBC drama Casualty, Thin Green Line, working with actors, the value of directing second unit, and much more. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening. Steve Hughes, thank you very much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Me too, Jason. Great to speak to you.
Am I correct in thinking that you originally started your career in the sound department?
No, that's on IMDb. Steve Hughes is like a really common name. I know about 3 or 4, and this. I mean, if you go by IMDb, I was like a sound mixer when I was 8. I think there's a sort of and I can't get it taken off. But no, I started out as an editor. I came from like a news editing background. Was my start in the business.
Okay, so how did you get into editing?
So I did a television production course up in the northeast of England, which was a sort of a part design based, because I was always kind of into my drawing and stuff, and part production based. And I did a short film that won a Royal Television Society award, and I thought, maybe this is possible because I'm just working class guy, 3 GCSEs from Wigan. I thought that's what other people did. So I did. So the short film that I did, which was called Cry Wolf, won a bunch of awards. And then I thought, I'm not just going to walk into a job directing a Bond movie. So I'd done a lot of editing on the course, like VT editing for drama and also for news stuff. And I came down to London in 1996, and I did a bit of VT playout where I was in a news gallery and they'd run VT, and I got to learn a bit more about editing and non-linear editing, and I would start to make my own short films in my spare time. But yeah, editing is invaluable for a director. I think it's such an important tool.
So the goal was always to be a director.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless when I was about 14 and I wanted to be a stuntman and I would just kind of jump out of trees and stuff. But yeah, I think I've been a huge film geek all my life. I would watch 3-4 films a day, and go to the cinema and collect movies and draw on the spines of DVD cases, VHS cases going all the way back. And it's what I've always wanted to do. I never thought I'd ever get to do it. All my friends and I used to watch movies and quote movies and stuff, and then somehow persistence paid off. I went to this kind of college to learn, and it took a while to get into directing because I was working on a show for the BBC called Liquid News, which was an entertainment news show, and Mal Young who was the head of drama at the time, came on as a guest, and my wife to give him a copy of like the last short film we made, because we made 10 short films in about sort of 8 years without any funding. It was just kind of all putting a bit of money in, very kind of amateurish. And then, but the last few we shot on film and they look quite nice. And he watched them and I said, I'd like to do some TV. And he said, I can get you into Doctors. And he was true to his word. He got me through the door, and that was my first gig in TV.
Amazing. How long did you spend on Doctors then, kind of learning your trade? And was walking onto a show like Doctors very different from your experience in news and live event and from making short films?
Yeah, I mean, it was completely different in one respect. Because I've made all these short films just with non-actors really, and I back then I didn't know how to talk to actors. It was like, say it like this, and that's not what you want to say. You want to give them active verbs and describe things in a much more interesting way, and that took time. But I was always confident with being able to shoot something and make it look interesting and tell the story visually, and also be practical enough. I'm very practical minded to be able to shoot stuff in a time. So that editing world kind of set me up with the skills to be able to get something shot. But it was I wasn't scared the first time. I went there and shadowed for a week on Doctors. On there they were doing, and at seven, you have 7 days to shoot three 30-minute episodes. And sometimes we'd be doing 18 pages a day. And I thought it's a challenge, but you get to learn, okay, well, I don't need to do 20 angles on the scene. I've got to do it in 2 shots or 3 shots. And it was such an amazing kind of proving ground for lots of directors and actors. And it's so sad that it's going, they're filming the last block now as we speak, and hopefully there'll be something to replace it. But it was an invaluable experience, and I did that for between about 2004, 2005. And then I think the first thing I did after that, there was a show called Land Girls, which was out of the same kind of stable. They got a commission to make some afternoon dramas, and I was lucky enough to be able to do the first block. And so I came in and we did mood boards, myself and the producer, a brilliant producer called Eric Ossington. And we wanted to punch above our weight. And even though I think we made 2 series of Land Girls for the cost of 1 episode of Doctor Who at the time, or it was the same cost as an episode of EastEnders. But we had a Messerschmitt playing attack, and we had an orchestral score, and we had a really great cast, and so proud of it. We won some awards. But yeah, it was a great place to be, Birmingham. And my Doctor's experience was I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's incredible. Just thinking of those budget levels.
I've worked on some really big shows, and I've worked on some stuff that they haven't got huge budgets, and it's important that you always give everything exactly the same amount of your kind of your all. And I think sometimes you can shoot something confidently with the same number of shots. And I learned that on Doctors. It was things like when you're doing singles, like make one of the singles slightly tighter than the other one. So if you've only got time for 2 singles, then whose scene is it? If it's A's character scene or B character scene, we'll make that one a bit tighter or make the other one a bit further off the eye line. So it isn't just completely matching. You feel like weirdly there's more variety in the shots when really you're just bouncing between 2 shots. So you learned how to shoot a 2-page scene in 5 minutes. There's a brilliant story from Doctor. Someone told me, and I hope it's not an urban myth, but someone said once they got back to the mill at 6:45, they're supposed to wrap at 7 p.m. And they had 2-page scenes to shoot, and they had to get all the gear off the van. They got all the gear off the van. They went upstairs. They rehearsed the scenes. They shot the 2 scenes, and they wrapped 5 minutes early. It's that fast, And if you can shoot something in that amount of time, then when someone says you've got a 3-page day today, really, there's never enough time to do any of it. Really, everything's busy, but when you learn to sort of think in that way, where you use your best instincts first and you be decisive, you don't start stroking your chin and thinking, oh, maybe we could do this. Like, no, make a plan now and stick to it. But yeah, like Doctors was the best.
They're brilliant lessons. What were the core directing principles that maybe you took from your time on Doctors?
I think first was like time management. It's really important because when you're working on, it's very different from when you're working on a short film where you say, oh, we can come back tomorrow and finish it tomorrow, or, can we have an extra hour for everybody? We'll buy pizzas. When you're doing, obviously sometimes things run over and there's overtime sometimes, but on a lot of shows there isn't. So it's about sort of saying, well, I've got an hour on the scene. Generally in a lot of dramas, it's about 20 minutes of setup. So setup is every time you move in the camera, and whether you've got 1 camera or 2. So in that 60 minutes, if you've got 60 minutes to shoot a 1-page scene, you've got time for 3 angles. So I literally break it down into that kind of stuff. If there's a scene that I think will need more time, then when I'm working with my first AD in prep, I'll say this is deceptively simple, or I can get through this very simply because A character and B character don't need singles. Like it's all about C character. So time management was really important. But then I also started to sort of try and learn to do a few flourishes, like do a really big long pullback at the end of an episode, or use music, or spend that bit more on performance. Like it's not always about rinsing it with coverage. It was about thinking, well, sometimes when you throw too many angles on something, it just feels like you're showing off. Like you're not making a Michael Bay movie, you're making Doctors. And you think, well, let's try and get the performances to flow the best they can, and get the scripts to make it, to work the best they can as well. So those were the 2 main things: was time management, but also looking for little flourishes every now and again where you can say, I've done this in 1 shot, or the performances are really grounded and real, and just cutting your corners where you need to, and just getting it all shot on time.
Okay, you've done so much high-end drama television, we couldn't possibly speak about it all, so I might bounce back and forth a little, but what I thought we could start with is Casualty, because I think you first started on it in 2012.
That's right.
Coming onto a show as iconic as Casualty, um, when you started in that world, were there any particular challenges that you faced kind of acclimatizing to that show?
No, I mean, I'd watched Casualty when I was growing up, and I always thought it was like kind of quite like it was a show for grown-ups. It was like a had social issues and stuff. And when I first met for it, I met as a brilliant. He was the series producer at the time, or it could have been the exec. And his name was Oliver Kent. And when I met with him, um, he said, "You know, what do you think of the show?" And I said, "Well, I said Casualty is a western." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, the ED is the town, and Charlie's the mayor, and Noel's the bartender, and Dylan's the undertaker, and the paramedics are gunslingers." And in my head, I just thought just identifying who all those kind of archetypes were, and that got me through the door. And I'd watched the show, and it's changed a lot over the years. Like sometimes it's a little bit more drama heavy, sometimes it's a bit more continuing drama, sometimes it's a little bit soapy. But there's always that constant of respect for the NHS. But going in, I think the challenge I think for that one was that it was because I'd done Doctor Who the year before, so I felt kind of confident because it was one of the first shows. It was I'd gone on to I went from Doctors to Doctor Who very quickly, which was scary, but also like fantastic for a fan of the show like myself. Um, and but having that confidence, think, well, I've directed Doctor Who, and I can do Casualty now, and it was just a really comfortable fit from the start. Like I get on with everybody generally. I'm a nice person, and I know what I'm doing. I think those are two massively important things that can't be overlooked. It's like, yeah, you can be the best director in the world, but if you're tough to work with, or you don't know what you're doing, and the crew have to carry you, you tend to get found out. But I've been doing this for 20 years and still getting away with it. And I think it's because I get on with people. But so I fitted in there nicely with everybody, and I think I think at the moment with the directors who are working on the show, I'm the longest running one there. And I think if I do one more block after the one I'm currently working on, I've done more episodes than anybody, which I'd wear as a huge badge of honor because it's such an iconic staple of British entertainment, and it's had its highs and lows and ups and downs, and But I think at the moment the show is in a particularly good place because we've won a bunch of awards in the last few years, and the viewing figures are good, and it's just a great place to be.
You mentioned being able to go into Casualty, having done Doctor Who with a sense of confidence because of the work you had done previously. At what point did you maybe begin to feel comfortable and confident as a director, as opposed to maybe having some inklings of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, we all have it. You always have that sort of vision of you directing, and then some guys kind of running, go, there he is, get him out there, and and you kind of caught and busted. But weirdly, like I'm a humble guy, I'm sort of easygoing and that kind of stuff. But I never felt that nervous. Weirdly, like even when I've done huge sequences and actions, we crashed a helicopter into the hospital. I'm never nervous about that stuff. I'm nervous about my kids being happy at school and paying the bills and that kind of stuff. And I'm confident in my ability to be able to sort of shoot my way out of a lot of situations. And that there are some shows you work on, and it's all about damage control, and it's like how much can I save out of this, or I'm spinning plates. And but there are other shows where the scripts are good, are great. I've done a lot of great scripts on Casualty. Um, if the scripts make sense to me, I can shoot it. That to me is what I've learned, is that you can make a really good episode out of a kind of a good script, but you can make an absolutely amazing episode out of a really good script. And I've been lucky to be able to do quite a few of those. But yeah, I've sort of I don't know, I've never really felt like nervous. I get I've sort of changed the way I work as well. Like for a long time, I planned absolutely everything. I mean, I was like really fussy. I do kind of camera plans and all these drawings and storyboards and stuff. And now the way I kind of tend to work is, uh, and I heard Steven Spielberg say this, who's my idol, and I heard him on a documentary. And what he says a lot of the time is that what when you get more experience, and you know how to shoot something, and what the point of the scene is, and how to manage your time, and that you have a plan in your head. So I never do any kind of paper plans now. I walk onto the set with my sides because I've worked out I know what the scene's about, I know where everyone's going to be in the story, and I've got a rough blocking, but then I start to look for better ideas on the day. So, it's good to have a plan that you can throw away, but what's great is discovering something on the set and coming up with something spontaneous, or an actor might have an amazing suggestion, or a costume assistant may do. And a good idea is a good idea wherever it comes from. And sometimes you discover something amazing, and if not, you've got a plan to fall back on. So my way of working now is it's quite I'm led by the actors, and because I've got a creative eye, and I can verbalize what I need to a DP. Then I prefer that something felt natural and real and be led by that. But then on the flip side, sometimes you're working on something which is much more conventional. I've done period dramas and stuff, and that it's much more of a sort of I've done mood boards and things, and then what you do then is there's a formality to the way things are shot. But my personal taste, I love things that feel kind of fresh and new and not over rehearsed. So I don't like to sort of over rehearse scenes. I don't really like to put marks on the floor so that if an actor's 2 inches to the left or right, people can follow it. So, and that's what we're bringing into Casualty a lot at the moment, is that kind of feel like it's almost docudrama. We did a couple of really exciting improvised episodes, which we've won a bunch of awards for, which is brilliant. And the actors love it because there's a sort of there's a responsibility on them, and all actors moan about lines on every job. They always, oh, I'm saying this rubbish, but then you put the impetus on them. A lot of the time they speak less like you do in real life, and you interrupt better, and things feel like the flow is really nice. And that when you shoot it in a kind of documentary style, it creates a sort of a much more grounded feel, and the response from almost unanimously from people online and the reviews I've read seem to really embrace that, because some people say, oh, it's meant to be a drama, not a documentary. But I think when you're treating something with respect like we are, and we're trying to make it feel as authentic as we can, for the most part with the medical stories, I think if you can do it as honestly as possible, and you're not putting that veneer of this is entertainment, you're putting something up so it feels like it's a truth, and you're not trying to sort of make something cool and slick. Like, I love just saying to the medical advisors, well, what would you really do? Don't forget about the TV version, and they'd say, well, we wouldn't really be kind of chaos all the time trying to save someone. It's much more of a procedural thing. And I embrace that. And it's much more tense, and it seems much more real. So that's the way I love working.
I love that word truth. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of what you're always chasing in anything that we're doing. You mentioned a bunch of things there that I would love
Go for it.
to dig into. You mentioned, I'm going to go in order so I remember them. You mentioned those kind of damage control shows, and that you can sometimes go in, you're spinning plates, and all you're doing is trying to fix things. I was wondering about the value of those experiences for directors, and what value, if any, that you have found in having those experiences that may be semi to overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, I mean, generally, it's not the best way to work. And sometimes, when you're a working director like myself, you have to take a job. It may not be, the next series of Blue Lights, like I'd love to be able to do, is my kind of dream show. But sometimes you'll work on a show and you'll say, oh, there's fun to be had there. There's a certain amount of there's a bit of visual effects work, and I've worked on quite a few things with young casts, and you know sometimes, like, I've worked on one show which we had like 3 days to shoot 30 minutes, and there's visual effects and kids in every single scene, and it was really, really tough. And what's with from doing doctors, you're concise, with and efficient with what you're doing, but you're not really being a proper storyteller, proper director. You're literally just there to try and drag it over the line. And there's a certain amount of kind of pride in that, sort of kind of going, we got it shot and it actually cut together, it looks great. But you don't want to be just there all the time to sort of be the one who's tidying up, and you want to be the one who is sort of elevating something and making it even better. Whereas there are jobs sometimes where you do that, but like sometimes it's a job you have to do, or sometimes you might want to work with a certain producer to impress them. And sometimes they are kind of strategic moves. I did I've done a few jobs that were really, really hard work, but like the pay was really good, or I got to work with a certain producer I wanted to work with. And even when it's really tough, it's look, it's still the best job in the world. Like, and I think it's great to be a kind of problem solver as well. Like half of my job, or half of any director's job is practical, and the other half is creative. And I think a lot of directors going into the industry just think, oh, I'm gonna, I've made some short films. I've got all the time in the world, and I'm gonna speak to actors and do all this kind of stuff. You don't have the time for that. Half of it is like you've got 15 minutes and you've got a page scene to do. That's where you earn your money. Is that being efficient and thinking, well, I'll move the actors in the frame. I'm not gonna have time for 5 shots. I'm gonna have time for 1 shot. So let's move the actors in the frame. That's where you learn your skills when things go wrong. It's not about some people will go from like a short film and suddenly are really lucky, and we'll get onto like a Netflix show. And I've heard horror stories where they're just not ready for it, or like big Channel 4 shows, because they're not used to shooting like 7 8 pages a day, or working with a crew at that level, or being able to sort of speak to a certain level of talent and give them the TLC that they need. And that's ultimately either the crew carries them or they get fired. And it's tough because I think it's so important to learn your craft. And some people that takes a long time, and some people kind of very lucky and get on and do it. But those jobs are for a variety of reasons, and that I just enjoy working anyway. But and then I've turned down some jobs where I've just thought I just can see that would be really, really just there's no value in me doing that. But for the most part, overwhelmingly, the jobs I've done, I've really enjoyed, and you get something from every job.
You just mentioned working with young people, and I loved Creeped Out. I know it's a
Oh,
young
thank you. I'm really
show,
proud of the show.
but I loved it. It's a great show. Um, so I'm curious, you're at that kind of point where you said, you used to plan and prep a lot and have a lot of kind of paperwork prep. What does your prep look like now then? And what do you kind of go to set with? Like, do you even arrive with a shot list, or are you just landing on the floor? What does the process look like for you now?
So I like to read the scripts over and over and over again, and I try and uh, get the scripts in the best shape they can, because in this modern world we work in, I mean, the scripts are always being rewritten and they're late, and and that just put a bit of extra pressure on. But when you get a script in enough time, I like to be able to read it over and over and learn it like an actor. Not that I could perform the lines, but I've got I've got a photographic memory for lots of things, and I've got really good recall on things. And generally, what I'll do is I'll read it and just sort of watch it in my head. And I think, what's the scene about? Whose scene is this? Is there a key image here that I'm going to try and pull out? What's the beginning of the scene? What's the end of the scene? And then I just think about it. And even though my short-term memory, like I'm always losing my keys and my shoes and my wallet and that kind of stuff, I'll know how many shots I'm going to do on that scene. And because I'm an editor as well, when I'm shooting that scene, I can say I'm going to use I'm only going to use the wide at the very end. If an actor fluffs a line or a boom dip's not going to be on that shot at that point, I can be very, very prescriptive over what I'm going to need. And that's why editing is such an invaluable thing. But I walk into the set in the morning, generally with a big bottle of lemon and lime water, and high hopes and being positive, and walking and just, I think for a long time I'd kind of get nervous about, because I was always kind of quite a shy person. I'm not like super confident now, but I'm more confident than I was, and that's because when you're doing your crew view, you have to speak to sometimes anywhere between 20 and 60, 80 people sometimes, and that a lot of the time I would just ramble all the way through it, and then or I'd over explain things. And then what I learned was that a lot of times that they don't need to know the reason for all these shots. They say, we're going to shoot a wide from over here that's going to contain this. We've got a 2 shot that is going to cover this, and I've got a single for the end and a little pop on the phone. So I've got 1 is the wide, 2 is this, 3 is this, and 4 is this. So we've got 4 shots, everybody. And I start off with a wide. That's all they need to know, and just being concise. And then sometimes you might see that shot and go, actually, let's go a bit lower down. Or I like to say to the camera operators, give them direction like an actor, and you say, make this character feel vulnerable, or make them feel strong, or use a bit of psychology in where people are in the frame. But yeah, my prep is I walk on with the sides, and I I know where I want out of the scene, but I like the actors to block it a lot of the time and just give them a bit of freedom. Sometimes they've got something very specific, like if I've done lots of action stuff, and that you have to be much more prepped for, is that exactly where everyone's coming from. But even so, I like to I work best when I've got the freedom to be able to keep coming up with ideas. Like today, I was shooting a scene where we had like a mother and daughter where I'm on Casualty at the moment, where mother and daughter were had fallen out, and it was very obvious. I was doing like a kind of a profile two shot, and there was a kind of drip stand that was just off to the side. So let's put that in the middle of the frame, because it's literally a barrier between the two of them. It's very on the nose, but it looked really nice. And I hadn't thought about that until I saw it. It's just because it was there on the side of the frame. So being able to sort of come up with new ideas, and also to listen to people's ideas and not be too rigid, because I think if you can, if a camera operator suggests something, or an actor says, I'd love to be able to do this, and you say, show me. And when you get those surprises, there's nothing better. You go home and you think, that's even better than what I was expecting. And because it is a team sport, all right, you are the director is the air traffic controller, but I'm not flying the planes. That everybody else is flying their own planes, and I'm just saying, can you land over here, land over there, let's fly to here. Just incorporating everybody's ideas, because it's such a privilege to be able to do this. And I want it to be like a really positive experience. Like, I think I like it to feel like a family when we're shooting, and that we are, it should be really, really enjoyable. And normally out of every block, when you get one or two kind of tense days where either something's gone wrong, or a technical problem, or I've been slightly overindulgent and not been sticking to my third gear rule. But every day is fun. You come on and you have a laugh, and that's the way it should be, because this is the best job in the world.
You said a bunch of stuff that is brilliant to hear, and I agree with. I love the idea of talking to crew like you would a performer, and giving them a sense of the result of what you're looking for, or some sort of actionable direction that isn't just mid-shot. That's brilliant. You also mentioned, and it's not the first time, the idea of being willing and open to accept ideas from all of your collaborators and arriving to set. And I think it's a really great place to be, to go to set hoping someone is going to have better ideas than I have. And it can be maybe difficult for some people to
give over that control
of their control. Yeah. And was that something you always had, or something that developed over time? I think for me, I hope I'm at that place kind of now, but when I first started, it was because I had a plan. It was like, shoot the plan, because I know that will work.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I was the same. I mean, I think, again, like, it's been so amazing and invaluable to have been an editor, because whatever you say to people on the day, you've still got to walk away with that media, and those shots are going to cut together, and you're going to have a certain number of shots that tell a story. And if not, then you have to be creative in the way, if you haven't got a lot of shots, how you still keep it visually interesting and still tell the same story. So coming on with the confidence of that, I know that I can make pretty much every situation work that I can. It's very, I think in my career, honestly, I think twice I've been dried, where I've gone, I don't know what to do here. Whereas there's times I'll say to an operator, this is my idea, can you make it better? Or what do you think? Rather than being too prescriptive, because I think sometimes when you're too prescriptive, if you say you're going to be out here on a 35mm lens and this kind of stuff, and you're going to say to the actor, you're going to do this, and you're going to get up on this line and that, I think people sort of stop being creative. They give you the work that you asked for, the result, but I think when they're more invested, people do, they try harder, and they think, oh, I'm not a puppet. It's a collaboration. That it'd be great if I could do this, and you say, yeah, and you get them excited about it. So it's not, I've watched other directors work, and it is, there's more of a sort of they're more of a dictator than a collaborator, and I think it's so important to be open to people's ideas, but also stick with your ideas. I've worked on a few shows where I've had a DP, and they've suggested stuff, and I've said it's a great idea and everything, but it's a bit extreme for that. Like on one of the period dramas I was doing, and there was a really nice shot a DP suggested, but it was far too I hate to use the word wacky, because it's not 1996 anymore, but it was too like extreme. And I said, no, it's all about frames within frames and that kind of stuff. And he was got in a bit of a huff about it. And I said, oh no, don't be in a huff. Like, just keep giving me your ideas. But like, I didn't take that idea, because sometimes I will. And a lot of the times I will, if someone says, oh, we could do this if we came around here, we can make this into a oneer or whatever. And you say, that's great. But, people should always be open to sort of listening to other people's ideas, because, but also, don't feel like you always have to take them. And I'll always say to if it's like someone who I haven't worked with before, you go out for a drink with them beforehand, or you sit down on the first day and you say, throw your ideas at me. Some of them I'll take and some of them will never take offense, and I'll say it no in a very polite way, or I'll give you a reason why. And it nearly always works out that way, because people understand that, like, I've got the whole episode in my head and I'm going to be the one in the edits, and I have to make it all come together.
That's a very important point. Knowing what you have to cut, knowing what the grammar and the language and the brief is. And it kind of segues nicely into a question I had, which is about working with execs, because a lot of the time you're making someone else's show as well. And as the director, you have to go in to that review and sit there and stand over what you have, what you've shot. So at Casualty, I think you have maybe seen 3 execs, 4 execs.
Yeah.
And I guess every exec coming in will have their own vision for the show, even though something as iconic as Casualty is still going to be Casualty, the brief will change a little bit. And I was wondering how, as a director, kind of working with so many executive producers on a show like that, how you adapted to each of those different personalities and those different visual briefs, maybe that changed.
Well, what we tend to have is, usually, on Casualty, the directors, the executive producers we've had have all been great, and they're not as hands-on. I think they're across the scripts and stuff, and then generally what you'll have at the start of your prep time is you have like a tone meeting with the series producer, and you talk about, if you haven't been on the show for a while, they'll just tell you, like, this is what the style of the show is, and these are the things that are important to us, and the things they like and they don't like, and then you just have a talk about the scripts, and you make sure you're all on the same page. And never really had a sort of bad viewing on Casualty. It's all, you sort out the problems, and you don't, if you want if you want to have surprises, you sort of spoil the surprise before you do it. You say, I'd love to do this as a one-er, or I feel like this isn't working, can we not have this moment here? And I'd rather get notes on set as well. Like, I love, when you have a really good producer. I'm working with a really good one now, and I always, some directors are scared of having a producer on set, but I love it, because I'd rather have a producer on set who says, can you get a close with that? Or they need to be angrier, rather than getting into the edit and you're in that awful situation where you're watching something and you can see them writing something down and you think, oh God, what are they writing down? And they say, have you got a close with that? And you're going to go, no, I didn't think I needed it. And, that has happened a few times, but very rarely, it's down to time. A lot of the time you haven't had time to do it. But if I'd rather have a producer there on set to say, can we have another one of those? Or, could he be sadder in the scene? Or, so I've got that immediate thing. So ideally, the viewings, and with the execs, you have your producers viewing first, and you work very hand in hand with your producer, and you've worked out on the day, they're there for a lot of the time, and you've worked out, there's no surprises for them. Then the series producer watches it with the exec, and they can't come in, and unless something's gone terribly wrong, and that, touch wood, that's never happened for me there, they, the viewings are kind of pretty straightforward. Sometimes it's like, can we play a bit more on our regular characters, rather than the guest stars, because it's a show that sort of thrives on our regular characters. So it's generally ending with a scene with someone on this or that, and it's that kind of stuff really is what they want. It's nothing's ever gone that far astray, because they're getting assemblies every day and every week. If something really jumped out to them, you would get a tap on your shoulder and say, they think you're doing too much of this, or don't forget to do that. So a lot of the, and it's the same with a lot of them, but Casualty, because it's such a well-oiled machine, being going for 38 years, it just runs really smoothly.
So is your editor then assembling dailies so they go, that's great? And I suppose, do you have opportunities then? Let's say if your editor goes, oh, you know what, like a close up on a hand here or this detail, will you have opportunities to potentially maybe pick them up over the rest of the shoot days or something if those things occur?
Yeah, well, sometimes, on all the dramas we tend to work on now, obviously you have whatever you tend to shoot on a Monday, the editor edits on the Tuesday. So they get all the rushes and then they edit that the next day. And then that assembly goes out on the Tuesday night. And then you watch that through, and you either kind of, I like to let editors get on with it, because like that's their time and they might still be kind of tweaking things. And that it's like, you've gathered all the ingredients in the shoot, they've made what they want to make out of it. But you might say, oh, I don't want a hamburger, I want a cheeseburger. And you just make up little changes. But yeah, there's always, I think if you're in Casualty world and you're in a location that you're inside the hospital, and then suddenly you need to pick up a phone, or a prosthetic didn't look as great on camera as what you were expecting or whatever, and you've still got the same people, it's pretty immediate that you can get the next day, you can go back, let's get a pickup of that wound, or the, you know, you can pick stuff up. The tricky thing is obviously when you're not in that location, but you know, you can, if it's a close up on a phone or something close up, then yeah, you can do it most places really. But that's the joy of having, like, I mean, the set we've got here at Casualty, it's almost like the size of a full-size hospital. It's like a massive soundstage and then another part of another soundstage. So you could walk from the far end of the outside thing and go all the way around, and in one big move if you wanted to. I mean, they did do it. It's amazing kind of one-shot episode a good few years ago, and that's the joy of it. But yeah, that's always an opportunity if you ever need to go back and pick anything up.
When you directed Thin Green Line, the improvised episode of Casualty, knowing what your prep looks like now, how different did that episode feel? I assume from a script and story perspective, it was very different.
Yeah, it was. So I'd done a TV show, a drama for Channel 5 about 7 or 8 years ago called Suspects, which was again, it was an improvised police drama. It was all about interrogating suspects and knocking on doors and stuff. And there was a sort of, we learned like I learned, it was like the fifth series when I did it. And I just took to it really well because, you know, I like naturalism and stuff in performances. And, you know, you shot it like a documentary, but we shot like 2 1-hour episodes in a week. So you had like 20 minutes a scene, and generally you would talk about the scene, you would shoot it like a documentary, and you would, even though you weren't saying there was two camera operators in the room, you would never do like two over the shoulders because those cameras would see each other. So you would do, say, one over the shoulder and one like profile, and you know, you'd go, oh yeah, that's really interesting, and that's, you know, you don't have the suspect waiting and then the police knock on the door. You know, you get out of the car with the police officers. And when I was here at Casualty, our previous series producer, Loretta Priest, said that they were thinking about doing an improvised episode, and would I be interested in doing it? So what we did was, first they said, well, let's rehearse for a week. And I said, no, if you rehearse, they're going to just put on their own little play. And the joy of all these improv episodes is the unknown, and that's the surprises that kind of come out of it, and the spontaneity. So, you know, we had a script and we reworked it quite a bit. And, you know, we basically just, it would be like a log line. So like in our prep time, what we would do is we'd still find all the locations with, like the way we'd do with a normal episode. But what you would do is you'd say, you know, we want this to be lit as practically as possible. So, you know, you want it to feel like, you know, there's natural sources and things, or there's lights in the room, or people go in and out of darkness, like for real. And so what we did, we found the locations, and then we would go and have a chat with the actors to make sure that they were all comfortable with what we were going to do. And when we were casting the guest stars, we found a really good actor called Sally Hodgkiss, who does a lot of improvisation, and she worked with the actors. And when we were casting, and we had, like, it was a really amazing process because the actors would kind of come in and they would do an improv, and then we would say they were amazing, and it makes sense. But a lot of the people who we chose had quite a lot of comedy experience, even though they weren't comedy roles. They just thought faster, weirdly. And then the actual the trickiest thing for it was how you schedule it, because you don't know how long the scene's going to be. So what we would do is we would, myself, the producer, Matt McHale, and our brilliant script editor, Harriet, what we do is we'd sit down and we'd say, well, this feels like a 2-minute scene or a 5-minute scene. So we would schedule it that way. But the improv might take 15 minutes. And we never overshot them. We'd shoot it very simply, and we'd shoot very quickly. So we wouldn't rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. We'd sort of show it. We'd rehearse it once or twice, show the camera operators how we were going to do it. And we always kind of cross shots, because you always want that natural reactions. And if people are going to do something slightly different on every take, you want to be able to cut between the continuity. And then what we would do then is we would shoot it very quickly, as in like not shoot and shoot and shoot. And because it was an improvised style, the style of kind of shooting was almost like documentary style. So using that thing of like, there could be camera operators in the room, but we don't see them. More that you're like an invisible observer. So the kind of language and the way how you shoot things is determined by like where the cameras would be in the room, and you block it in a certain way. And the shots don't have to match. You don't have to do wide shots. You're never doing close-ups of phones. And it was just, and the actors love it, because we did a really exciting thing on the first day where there's one of our paramedics who goes into a block of flats. It was the first scene that we shot, and everyone was quite nervous about it. It's quite a gamble for a show that's so established as this, where a paramedic goes into this block of flats, And as he opens up the front door, there's a guy there with a knife who's having like a psychotic breakdown. He's off his meds, and it was really intense. And we didn't rehearse that scene, and I didn't want the actors to meet. So the actor called Lucas, who was playing the guy in the flat with the knife, didn't meet Milo, who was playing our paramedic. And what we did on the day was we rehearsed the first bit as he's knocking on the door. Then we put the two cameras back to back, and we did one camera facing the guy with the knife and one camera facing the paramedic, and we just let them improvise. And it was so the paramedic was absolutely terrified, and our paramedic advice had said to them, you wouldn't go across the threshold whilst the guy still got a knife. So it was all about talking him down. It wasn't like coming in and give me the knife. It was like we wanted it to feel as authentic as possible, and just giving these little acting challenges, and the actors loved it. And what you needed that took a bit more time was the edit, because our first cut was like 75 minutes for a 50-minute episode. So what we did is, and it was a really enjoyable 75 minutes, but you basically sort of editorializing as you're shooting as well. You're thinking like, okay, I probably don't need that part, and I can cut that part to that bit. Again, experience as an editor is invaluable. And then you get into the edit, and things can be a bit looser the way they're cut, so that not necessarily that you're going to jump cut through things, but you can there's a bit more flexibility if something feels like it's documentary, that you're not trying to hide the fact that it's a bit of compressed time. So what you would do then is, you would say, well, do we need that? Let's come in later. Let's play longer on this here. There was a better take of this, like you would do with a fine cut, but it just takes a bit more to find the story. So yeah, it was such we've done 2 of them now, and we've won a bunch of awards for the Thin Green Line, and that's been amazing. But the most rewarding thing was that people from like the NHS real paramedics like reached out on social media and would say that's what it's like, and thank you for the show, for seeing us and not making it kind of silly, and that was the best review you can ever get in the world.
What an incredible achievement. You
Yeah.
mentioned medical advisors, and I would assume it is a challenge to maintain medical accuracy when you are improvising like that. How difficult was that aspect? Or our cast who've been on the show for quite some time very up on the language?
Yeah, I mean they're normally pretty good, but we always on even on the more conventional episodes, we always have a medical advisor, and we've had medical meetings. And if there's something really tricky, then maybe the actors spent a bit of time, rehearsing something like a bit of a medical procedure, just so they understand what they're actually doing. But a case in point was that on the Thin Green Line, we had a really affecting and upsetting scene about the paramedics get to a location, an address late because of a time waster, and when they get there, we kind of jump cut to like 20 minutes after they've been there, and there's a guy there who's had a heart attack, a middle-aged guy, and his wife's there, and she'd called for an ambulance. They've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and because of some people waste resources of the NHS and time wasters, that they've got there late because someone's called them there and they've lied to them for something. So when they get to this place, it was about, a lot of the time for me, it's like getting the tone of what it feels like in this real situation, and forgetting the drama of it, and trying to say, instead of making them like action heroes, let's make them look like the way you really are, and that you're tired and it's stressful and sometimes you don't know what to say. And unfortunately, the husband in the scene, the man who's had the heart attack, dies, and his wife is absolutely distraught when they stop. And it's and I get even emotional just thinking about it now. When they say, the compressions, he hasn't, and he has died, because they have to be that clear. And the amazing actors in the scene, so our regs and also the guests we had, just, it was completely authentic. And you give them a few kind of feed ideas, like tell them, what took you, and you're useless, because it's important to show that some people don't react very well in that situation. They want someone to blame. And so the medical advisors, when they watched it, obviously they told them how they do the compressions, how long they would do it, how long you wait, whether you would leave the woman in the room afterwards, and that kind of stuff. All of that was dictated by what the medical advisors gave us. And when we finished shooting the scene, some of them were crying, and said the hair stood up on the back of my neck, because they said that's exactly what it's like. It's not, they crush ribs when they're saving people, and people are sick, and it's not like, start and we're going to do this, and it's great and it's cool, and that's been great on lots of dramas. But when the reality of it is, it's a horrible situation for everybody involved. And these kind of heroes, which is what they really are, who are not earning a lot of money, sometimes like £25,000 a year, if you can believe that. Are doing this day in and day out, and that was the aim of that episode, is to sort of make it feel as truthful as possible, and not to sort of make a dynamic roller coaster action adventure, is for it to be like a gut punch. And I think that's hopefully what we achieved.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's safe to say job done.
Yeah, thanks. I loved it. I mean, it's been, I've worked on bigger shows, I've worked on smaller shows, but I love Casualty because, and where it is at the moment, where we are leaning more into that realism. It's great because it's the truth, it's naturalism, it's surprises. I mean, I've been shooting today, and we're getting great stuff. It's like really, like, even though it's more of a conventionally scripted episode, the actors, we're getting really nice, interesting actors. And I'm always trying to promote getting new actors into the business as well. Like, I teach these acting workshops, where you get people who've not maybe had that break yet, of different ages. And I think I've managed to get 3 or 4 into this block. And it's not because I just gave them the part because I wanted to give them a break. It's like they were the best people for the part as well. Like, if they weren't, they wouldn't get the job. I've done that with actors friends who you get in for a job, and sometimes it's someone better, and I always give it's the right person. But it's important to sort of to let the next generation in, and you get different voices, and it's fantastic. And that's what is great about Casualty, is it's always different every week.
I was wondering, in again those improvised scenes, when all you have is kind of a log line for the scene, and maybe it comes from your experience on Suspects and different work previous, but how do you know you have it? A director will just know when they have the scene and they have the performance they want, but we usually have a script, and as you said, you played that through your head a bunch of times. But when you don't know what is really going to happen in the moment, how do you know that, yeah, we got the scene now?
Well, generally, what we would do is, when we were sort of reworking the script a lot, is that it was like, well, what's the point in the scene? Is it for someone to win, to lose? To get information, to seduce someone, to sort of attack them? And you just know. It's like you watch it, and and it's always better. It's always better to take stuff out rather than add stuff in, because you can't add stuff in if they haven't said it. So it's better to let them go off on flights of fantasy sometimes. And we had one scene where there was like an old soldier, and a cat kept coming in. Really, the cat of the house owner kept coming in on cue. I've never like the 3 or 4 takes we'd do, and it was almost like on cue. And they went into this improvisation about the cat, and it was lovely. And you kind of go, running at 75 minutes, let's take all that stuff out. And the point of the scene is the paramedics arrive there. He's not pissed off at them, because he's got experience of working, on the front lines himself as a soldier, as an ex-soldier, and it's in a way more devastating for the paramedics to be killed with kindness. And he offers them a cup of tea, even though he's been waiting there for 11 hours. And they see he's a military man, and he's a widower, and you think they're going to feel absolutely awful, because the resources are so stretched. And once you feel like I've got that, you tend to sort of go on a bit longer, and then you kind of go, and we've got that, and that's where we'll kind of come out. But again, back to the editorial thing, you think that's the end of the scene there, and then sometimes you might say, let's neaten that up a little bit, let's just get to here, and then we don't need all the stuff about the cat. So it's editorializing, and you'll know when you've got it, because something just makes sense. And that, for me, it's like a bullet goes off behind my head, and you kind of go, no, I've got it. And sometimes it's determined by time. Sometimes you haven't got all the time in the world. You might have to do this big scene, and you've got 20 minutes to do it. And if you've got the point of the scene, what the scene's about, it's not about quantity of shots, it's about quality of if you told the story.
I'm just trying to put myself in that situation of what it would be like. But again, I guess having the experience you had of the show as well, probably, well, no better man to go in and make that episode.
Thank you. I mean, it's great because they, I've done some really big episodes, and I've done, like, the block I'm doing at the moment is more of a kind of standard block, but I'm still looking for opportunities to sort of to make it that, even when you're doing the shows that are 3 days, you kind of go, I want this to be the best version of what this can be. Like, you might think, oh, the script's rubbish, or this actor's not very good. It's like, no, sod that. Like, you're there to sort of drag it kicking and screaming. Like, there's an image that's why it pops into my head all the time, is like, the thing that sums up directing for me is the movie Dodgeball. There's a painting on Ben Stiller's wall where he's literally got this kind of massive bull by the horns, And sometimes it's as hard as that. You're thinking like, got to drag this over the line. I've got to get it shot and complete. And if not, then I've got to be creative of how to do it. And it's on your doorstep to be able to make it work, because people put a lot of faith in you, to sort of to tell, you're getting paid at, getting paid well, and you want to sort of, you want to impress people. I think it's about, obviously, like I said, you want to get on with people, but also you want to sort of make your episodes be the best, and not in a competitive way, but you kind of go, I'm completely happy with my episodes. Like a lot of the time I'll watch my episodes go out and I think, yep, I'm happy with that. I'm not like some tortured artist where you kind of go, oh, I can't watch this, I could have done it a million times better. Once you've shot it, it's done, and you live with it, and you're happy. But yeah, it is exciting to do improv, and I'm hope, that, I don't think it's like something you could do on a show like Casualty all the time. I think it'd be have something where people learn how to do it, because it is a bit of a skill to learn, but it's not impossible. In a way, you have to forget a lot of the stuff you do, because a lot of the time you'll get a script and you'll think, it says in the parentheses angry, so they have to be angry, so I'm going to remind them to be angry here. And a lot of the time you say, well, that's not what the scene's about. The scene's about, someone learns that, that's the drunk driver who killed, his son, and he's sizing him up. And it could be someone in a supermarket, and you think, I don't need to do 28 different angles of what the guy's shopping. I'm watching it from all this guy's point of view. And then, a lot of the time you take dialogue out. What you realize is that people talk, in more broken sentences. So like I always say to actors, like, crumble the dialogue or paint outside the lines. And not to say change the lines as much as you want, but just make something kind of sound fresh, and the sort of stuff that they would normally rehearse in a mirror and try and iron out. You say, no, that's the stuff you want to keep, because it feels like the first time you've said it. And that's the kind of, for me, that's the sweet spot when you're working with actors and you say, I'm just hearing the acting too much. And you can give people notes and it'd be really friendly, but you want it to feel as natural as possible. But then it depends from show to show. On like the period dramas I've done, it's like you want the dialogue to sound like music. It should be bouncy and fun and lyrical and joyous, and whereas Casualty is better now that it's a more grounded show in the rhythm of the way people speak.
Just while we're on acting and actors, and you mentioned running workshops with actors and bringing new actors into the industry as well, which is brilliant. Do you have any, asking you a question about how do you work with actors is so broad. So what I was going to ask was, do you have any kind of core principles or kind of pillars of how you approach working with any actor that you are working with?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, so what I've done even since my doctor's days is, I would always call up the actor beforehand, or ideally meet with them. And sometimes if you're working with people who are playing like husband and wife or mother and father or whatever, is get the three of you together and have a drink somewhere and talk. So you break the ice, because it can be quite an intimidating atmosphere for people who sometimes might not have a lot of experience, or they've got a huge story, and on day one they're doing the last scene of the story, which is often the way it works out. It's like the wrong way around, and they're having to walk in. So breaking the ice with people is really important to me, and then getting them excited about it, and being really honest and saying, look, I'm an editor and I'll cut around things, and if you ever feel like you want to have another take, and I've got all these kind of sets of things out just to make actors feel comfortable so that they trust you. And then when you walk onto the set and you are working at a certain amount of speed, generally I will say to them, look, paint outside the lines and crumble the dialogue a little bit, and it doesn't have to be word perfect, for this kind of episode, and just encourage them to feel confident in what they do, and also to try things. Sometimes when you work with new actors, sometimes I feel like they feel like they have to do everything at the same level all the time, like everything's a BAFTA clip, and it's not. Something I a lot of the time it's getting people to do less. It's after us doing it after a certain amount of time, it's quite easy when it's suspiciously easy when you do a bit less, for actors as well. And that's the way when people speak. There's that brilliant stuff about De Niro saying, just because you're angry doesn't mean you have to shout, because there's different ways of interpreting kind of behavior. And I think David Fincher goes a lot into about behavior across time, is what his view of directing is. And it's, sometimes it's finding an interesting way of doing something or serving the story. But yeah, it's working with actors that you feel like you can be honest with, and friendly with, that you can be open with as well. Like if something's not working, you say, I'm not sure that's working, or, and I you know, I've learned more how to speak to actors, like come from an editing background. Originally, I was all about the pace and the editing, that kind of stuff. And I read lots of books about it, watched 100 YouTube clips. And, what I found out is that, what actors want, like active verbs to play. And you don't say, be angry, you say, I want you to attack. And that doesn't mean physically, but it gives them something to be able to play, or I want you to seduce them. So they've got something to play in the scene. And you talk about where the scene is in the story and what's the point of the scene. Like, for me, every scene is like the name of an episode of Friends, like the one where he finds out who killed his son or whatever, and that's what the scene's about. And you break it down in simple terms as much as that. And I don't like to give lots of notes. Like, it's always best to let the actors have free run first, because you don't want to impose stuff, because they've obviously rehearsed it and come up with some of their own ideas. It's good to give them a bit of freedom, a lot of freedom first, and they're always going to work within a space that you've provided. That they're going to be around that bed, or they're going to be in that corridor. And sometimes you might give them a little steer of doing this. Can you be a bit further away from the wall, because it gives me a bit more depth that way. And just being honest with them, and not trying to just get them to do it for the sake of the shot. Sometimes you just trying to. There's a brilliant story, isn't there, with I'm paraphrasing slightly, but Christopher Nolan was working with Al Pacino in Insomnia, and they were losing the light, and Nolan's DP said something about, like, do you think we can get Al Pacino to be over by the window? And Christopher Nolan was a bit apprehensive about just saying, could you play it over by the window because we're losing the light? So we went over and said all this stuff to Al Pacino, something like, I think he's looking out. I think he would cross the window to look out about his future and his, and the dawn that's coming in. And Al Pacino just said, like, you want me to stand by the window? And he said, yeah. And he goes, that's all you had to say. And sometimes you can just say to an actor, can you find a way to do this? And actors almost always will say, great. If it makes them look better, then that's what they'll do. And just being honest with them. And look, there's going to be times over your directing career where you work with actors who aren't the best, who may have been great in the audition, and you're thinking like, okay, well, what do I do here? And you thinking like, okay, how can I cut around that there? And trying to get as much out of them as possible. Like I've worked with like kids on Creeped Out. I've worked with some amazing kid actors, but not just on Creeped Out. Sometimes when you're working with younger actors, or sometimes slightly less experienced actors, it's like they've learned the lyrics to a song, but they don't know the melody. So all they've done is they've learned the words, and they haven't thought, well, I've learned the lyrics to Tiny Dancer, but I don't know it's this lyrical upbeat kind of thing. It could, they'll just learn it, and you haven't got time when you're shooting to say, on this line you're thinking this, on this. You're hoping that they come to set armed and they know hopefully 100%. But sometimes you have people who only know 50% of it, or have only read it in the makeup chair, and you waste time, or you lose time. We having to explain things to them, and because they haven't done their prep as well. It should be like it's a kind of it's not the toughest job in the world. I think if you know what you're doing and you're working with good people, it can be suspiciously easy, because you're getting as much juice out of it as possible from everybody. It's tough when the schedule's impossible, or you've got actors who are not as interested as they should be, or they haven't learned it to watch it. That's where you waste time. But the actual shooting part, for me, is joyous. It's like you come home and you think, oh, I've got my day, and I shot some really good great stuff today with great performances, and that's going to cut together really well. And it's fantastic when you have a great day, but like not every day is like that. It can, but you can have some really horrible days, and you go away really deflated, and you get into the edit and you go, it's not as bad as what I thought it was going to be. And you get a really good editor, and with your own editorial brain, you think, I can make something out of that. And the producers will know sometimes why things didn't happen the way they want to, but as long as you still tell the story, then everybody's happy.
Been there.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, all directors do. I mean, from every level. It's like, people who've done it for 20 years like myself, or people who've got some kind of really cool kind of credits like yourself as well. You feel like I listen to podcasts as well with like really big name directors, and they have the same days as us. Like, it's like, oh, the lights broke, or the camera broke, and we lost this actor at 2 o'clock and we had to shoot around them. It's all the same. The only difference is you get better catering, I suppose.
Yeah. I was recently asked, just talking about working with actors, a young actor asked me about just advice And it was funny, one of the first things I said was just know your lines when you arrive.
Know your lines and listen to what the other people are saying. Don't just wait for your line. I mean, I'm sure you've done this as well, Jason, where you're working with an actor and you know, you're shooting, coverage and you're into singles, and sometimes that person is just literally waiting for their line. So they'll say the line and then it's like they go into freeze frame. You
Yeah.
say, no, no, you've got to listen. And, half of acting is reacting. Like it's some of the workshops that we've been doing with the newer actors. Um, it's, we do these improv things and we just say, you're always acting in that stuff in that improv situation. So that's the way you should be in a scene and keep it fresh. And it, there's just as much acting in someone being very quiet and not doing very much as someone who's shouting like Al Pacino style. It's like that scene could be about the person in the corner. It's not always about the person who speaks the loudest. And just making interesting decisions. But yeah, it's important to know your lines and listen. A lot of actors get kind of terrified about continuity, and continuity is as important. But with my editor hat on, you can fix a lot of things in post. I mean, it's great if the continuity works, but they're not robots, and there's not time to make everything perfect. So I say that to actors as well at the start. It's like, look, keep your blocking and what you're doing simple. Like, don't do a Rubik's cube in a scene. Just have it in one hand. Because we have to repeat that, or you're gonna have to eat the food 20 times. And keep it simple. I think you can do something simple better. That's one of my big mottos. Like, I've done loads of massive wanners and big action sequences, but even then, there's still the ethos behind what the way I'm telling that story is something very simple. Like, if I've got 12 people in a scene, in my head, I think it's 2 people in a scene because I've got 5 people on that side and 6 people on the other side, and I'm on this side of the line. And I'll keep it really simple, and I'll make sure that the actors don't go off into a million different directions because I haven't got time to do a million different eye lines. Like, part of your job as a director is to direct the time and the resources that you have. It's not just about covering the scene, because a script supervisor could do that. It's like, well, whose scene is this? And you have to sort of marshal the resources. Like a director who I've heard of, like would shoot, had once shot a scene around a dinner table where he did a wide shot of the dinner table, then he just shot over everybody's shoulders, every eye line, and it took like 2/3 of a day for like a 2-page scene. And first off, like, how it's going to look visually very boring because you've either got a wide shot or you've got a headshot, and it's just bouncing between these headshots. It's boring. You kind of go, well, it's not a scene about everybody's. Not everybody needs an eye line there. It's like, is it the host? Is it the lady in the corner? Whose scene is it? And then think about it being from their point of view, and then keep those people on that side of the line. Especially on, like, I mean, on bigger shows, you do get more time, and you can sometimes get all the lines you need. But I watch a lot of American dramas and British dramas as well, and you watch and you kind of go, do you know, it's not always about having rinsing it with coverage. A lot of the time, you watch them and you think, look, there's only 2 shots on that, and look what they've done with those 2 shots. It's very efficient. Or you watch something like The Brilliant Succession, and you say, eye lines never match, but there's a sense of energy in the way it's cut and it moves around, and you know who all these people are. Like, a lot of directors, when they learn their craft, they're told to match everything. Oh, this camera's going to be 6 feet, and that's going to be 6 feet away, and that single was the same size as this on this lens. The audience are different now. I think things feel more contemporary in the way that they're told and edited and shot, and that the psychology and who's bigger in the frame and where they are on the frame and that kind of stuff, or how long you stay on that shot. You don't always have to be on the person who's speaking because it's not that person's scene. There's all stuff you just learn as you go along, and I never learned any of that through college. When the course that I did was much more practical based, and I just learned that through speaking to other directors and watching YouTube clips and listening to brilliant podcasts. And you learn a lot and you steal a lot. And it's great when you get affirmation when you hear other directors work, and you're going to go, like I said, I heard Spielberg on a documentary and I was like, I do that. And then it just made you think, I'm doing it. It must work. And, the end results I'm happy with, and people are happy, and I get asked back, and, what more can you ask for?
There was two things that you mentioned there. One, just to reiterate, I think for anyone who is interested in directing, is I think simple is a great principle. And when I initially trained in multi-camera, my mentor at the time encouraged me to think simple. And it goes against maybe your instinct initially, because everyone wants to move a camera in a certain way just because. And you very quickly realize actually visual efficiency is much more interesting and alive generally as well than the opposite. And on the continuity front, just speaking of Spielberg, I think it's Close Encounters. Spielberg has loads of continuity issues, but it doesn't matter.
No.
Because the performances are so good and you're watching the film, not what way someone's tie is tied or hanging.
Agreed. I mean, there's that brilliant one in Goodfellas, isn't there, where Paul Sorvino's cigar kind of goes in and out of his mouth and stuff. And I must have watched that movie 50 times before I noticed that. I'm so kind of engaged in the scene itself. But yeah, doing something simple is better because, even when you do something simple, it can still be elegant. Like I think simple doesn't mean that you have to put someone like center of the left of frame and you're over someone's shoulder and you can put someone in an interesting place in the frame, whether it's negative framing or headroom, or whether it is conventional, or is it over the shoulder? Is it like the Coen brothers don't do lots of over the shoulders? They kind of get the camera quite close to the actors and stuff, or is it really long lens? And it's the same number of shots, but you think, well, how am I telling the story? It's like the first question I ask whenever I'm working on a show and you read a script is either am I watching a story or am I telling a story? And if I'm watching a story like Casualty, it's like long lens, or I'm observing like the camera is very reactive. So if there's a line of dialogue and I'm doing singles, and sometimes I'll do some panning singles, the camera might be on someone, and I say, don't go over there and land as the line starts. I want it to feel like when you hear that, oh, what's that person saying? So it's very reactive. But sometimes when you're telling a story, it's much more deliberate. Like I feel like you're being more psychological in the way you use the frame. Where are people looking down the lens? Is it much more that you're manipulating the audience and saying you're going to feel this because I'm doing this specifically? So that's the first question I always ask when I'm reading something, and and it goes from job to job. It's good not to sort of just have your one style that you do for everything. It shouldn't be one size fits all. It's like every story needs a different storyteller, and that's what's really exciting. You can kind of go from something which is very, very observational and naturalistic, and then the next job you could be doing something which is I'm doing all these kind of overhead shots, or like Edgar Wright is very kind of telling a story in the way he edits and is very deliberate and very cool. But when I did Creeped Out, I being a big huge film fan, so I would say, well, this episode is like The Burbs, so like there's a kind of cat story episode. So not that I copied any frames, but we had a few kind of references in the score and the feel of it, and we got like some of the names we took from the film we used on the like the street name and stuff. For me, it's like in my head I'm thinking like, what would Joe Dante do in that situation, or what's his rhythm of doing things, or a John Carpenter episode, or whatever you're doing. Because in my head, you steal from all these ideas and you're inspired by it. I mean, I think steal sounds too like you're doing something nasty. It's not. It's like you're inspired by them and you feel like in your head that's what I would like it to feel like this. I did a Casualty episode a few years ago, just before the pandemic, which was called Code Orange, and it was sort of a nod to the kind of Salisbury poisonings. It was a kind of a chemical incident thing, and it felt like it needed a different type of storytelling. So we managed to get kind of Cook lenses 239. We shot it in 239 anamorphic, and we wanted it to feel like a David Fincher movie. So the way we framed the shots, like the camera never like panned around and followed, like the actors moved in the frame, or it was a very deliberate move. And then other times you say be like Paul Greengrass and be very reactive, and that's how that's my prep a lot of the time. I'll watch a film and then 2 years down the line I'll read a script of a kid show or a comedy show or whatever, and you're going to go, I'm going to shoot this like The Big Lebowski or whatever, and it doesn't mean that you're stealing shots, but in your head you're inspired to sort of tell a story that's got the same kind of tone of that a lot of the time.
Would you call what you're describing a little bit like perspective, like the perspective of camera, of audience?
Yeah, it's tone a lot of the time. It's trying to find out, like, when you have a meeting for a job, they'll say like, what do you think the tone of the show is? And I think if you can agree on what the tone is, then you're off and running really, because the tone sometimes is that like it feels it's much more performance based, or it's this person's story. If you can agree that in advance, then hopefully then you're not going to get any horrible notes in the fine cut. But I've had jobs where and all directors have this, where one of my many food analogies is that some, like, I think that director's like a chef, and someone says, can you make me a delicious key lime pie? and the producer actually for this key lime pie, and they give you the recipe, which is the script, and you have all the cast and the crew, which is the ingredients, and then you have the shoot, which is the oven. And so you make this key lime pie, and you whisk it all up, and you do it, and you give it back to them in the viewing, and they go, actually, I'd like a steak and kidney pie. And you say, well, that's not what you asked for. And that's sometimes about like, because the tone's very different, or that you wanted this or that. And then you'll say, but you asked for a key lime pie, and they'll say, well, but this exec it doesn't like lime. So let's scoop out all of this stuff and let's put some steak and kidney filling in, and you'll butcher the edit, and it'll just look like you've made a mess. And sometimes the director has delivered exactly what an exec wants, but will you watch stuff go out by very experienced directors and you say that looks a bit of a mess, and it's sometimes just because there's been a change of plan later on, or sometimes that you've made some very bold decisions, and the channel who you made it for think that's too bold, and you have to sort of sacrifice it. And it's a real shame, because I think if you can agree a lot of those things in advance, then there's it ends on a positive, because you've all delivered what you set out to do.
That's really good advice, and not the first time I've heard it. That idea of just making sure everyone is making the same show or the same film, because otherwise it becomes an unpleasant experience for everyone potentially.
Yeah, because like on some shows, I mean, a good friend of mine said he worked on a show with like 16 executive producers. Like, how do you please all of them? It's impossible, because they're all going to want different things, and you as a director, like, it's also important to, as much as I've got integrity in what I do, I'm always working for someone. Like, I will fight my corner for as long as I feel like I need to, but then at the end, they've paid me to make this show, and that I'm not someone who would steal the rushes and kind of posted shit through someone's letterbox, do anything stupid like that. But what you've got to pick your battles, and if you've agreed what show to make, then it's so much better further down the line. But at the end of the day, you are working for someone. It is show business, and you are working for someone who they can take it off you at the end anyway. So it's best to sort of get on with people and stick around and protect it as much as you can for as long as you can. But sometimes it's out of your hand. But generally, directors, like myself, who have got away with it for 20 years, there'll be another job, and like not every job you work on is going to be the best job you're ever going to do ever. But you make the best of it. And sometimes you think, I'm doing this job because the pay is really good and I can pay off that credit card debt. Sometimes it is that, or I can pay to go on the holiday and I'll still give it 100%, but I'm doing this job for money. Or sometimes you think there's not a lot of money, but it's an absolutely amazing script, or a chance to work with the director, or there's no money in it. But you've got to have that passion to sort of to be able to get fired up about it. And coming from, like I said, from Wigan, I've never ever lost that thing of being surprised when someone says, do you want to direct this TV show, or even having a meeting, because I think it's good to sort of remain grounded, because there are a lot of people, you'll know this yourself, Jason, you come across people who have got like a really big ego about stuff, and you kind of go, but you're not really that good. And also, like, we're only making TV dramas or films sometimes, like, and as amazing as an opportunity as that is, it's entertainment. I mean, God, we working with our paramedics on Casualty, and you go, they'll say, oh, what did you do last night? And you say, oh, I went shopping to Sainsbury's. And they'll say, oh, what did you do? And say, oh, we were in a 4-car pile up on the motorway and 2 people died. And you go, that's a proper job. And our job is to sort of to hold a mirror up to that and make it feel as real as it is. But it's an amazing job, and a fantastic honor to be able to do it. And I'm just really excited about what kind of comes next, because it can be a struggle, and you'll know this yourself, is that there's a lot of times where you doubt yourself and it's stressful, and sometimes there's money implications because you have a family or you've got bills to pay, and it's your dream and you feel like you absolutely have to do it. But there's also no shame in, like, I'm an editor as well. I edit show reels and I kind of pay the bills sometimes that way between gigs, and it's hard not to be jealous sometimes and bitter, but it's just wasted energy. You can make something on your iPhone and just keep being productive, because you're still telling stories. But I'm still loving it every day, and even when something really like seems unsurmountable, you've got a team around you, and you always get through it. But yeah, so I still love it after all these years.
Right. And I agree totally. As difficult as it can be, it is the best job in the world, and we're incredibly privileged to get to do it. I was going to ask you, you mentioned a couple of times about one, loving the work, and two, regardless of the work, going in and doing the best you can all of
Yeah.
the time. So I wanted to talk. It's not really it's kind of a bad segue, but I would love to talk about your experience on Death in Paradise. Because as I mentioned before we start recording, when I watched your two eps, I thought that there was a great visual energy in them that I hadn't really seen over the last while, and that the show has just been there for such a long period of time. I thought you did some really interesting things. So my first question was going to be is it as hard a job as you hear as a result of the weather?
Yes. In one word, yes. It's the weather and the noise over there. So I wanted to inject that's what I wanted to. I wanted to inject some energy and do a few different things. Um, and I knew it was gonna be hard work because I've got other director friends who've done it, and they would say, oh, the weather's, it's so hot all the time, and you have to dry the actors off down, every 30 seconds, and the noise is terrible. And it's still kind of a busy kind of schedule. It's not like something where you're doing 2, 3 pages a day. You're still doing 7, 8, 9. We even did 10 pages a day sometimes, so it can be quite fast. But it's a really like positive vibe out there. I mean, it's called paradise for a reason, because whichever way you point the camera, it's amazing. And that's, you get these. I got two really kind of solid scripts which made sense and had lots of really, really good surprises. So it was about just turning that into sort of storytelling. And that's but the everyone talks about the heat, but not a lot of people talk about the sound. I mean, got the cockerels and the all the time. You can be doing this really big scene and someone says, and the killer is, and you and it just kills the mood. It's really stressful. But you just kind of keep a calm head, and like no one's going to die at the end of the day. And you might be back there the next day and you say, look, we didn't get to do that last shot, so what we're going to do is we'll pick up that tomorrow and we'll do that. We can do that again. But they're a really good team out there, and there's sort of like a third of British crew, third crew from France, and a third from the island of Guadeloupe. And it's not a huge industry over there for kind of crew, so they bring a lot of people in. But it's people enjoy it because you can rap. You tend to have to rap about 5 o'clock, otherwise all the frogs come out at 5 o'clock, and all you can hear is this going, and you can't record any dialogue. So unless you're doing like a full-on night shoot, you rap at 5, and then I don't drink, but you can go and sit in a bar with your friends, and then or you can run and jump in the sea, and the sea is like kind of opal green, and the sand is like silk on your feet, and you've got that the weekend. And it's hard work, it is, because again, you've got all of those outside pressures. But if you know what you're doing and you've prepped it, you get prep time. And again, if you've got the scripts to make sense, that to me is like the thing that you know is the most important thing to get right when you're doing your prep, is you get your script right and you solve problems. Because it's so much cheaper and easier to solve problems on paper than it is on set, or get in the edit and think this doesn't work. um, but Death in Paradise was a really positive experience, and if they ever ask me back in the future, I'd love to do it.
You had mentioned a little while ago just about how you're aware you're always making someone else's show, someone is paying you to do that job, or I have heard it described as kind of being like a ghostwriter. And the exec or the showrunner, they've kind of established this book. You've been hired to write a chapter. You can't change the grammar and the language of it. But in watching your work, I think what I've seen is you always seem to find a way to inject Steve Hughes into the work. And I think you did it on that show. I had mentioned that great Steadicam shot where I'm not sure exactly how long it lasts, but you move the actors within the frame. You get into a close up on the newspaper, you bring them across the room until Neville answers the phone.
Yeah.
And it's just really dynamic. And I don't think I had seen a shot quite like that on the show.
Well, that was deliberate, because I've seen the show over the years, and I know like it's got a formula and it works, obviously, because it still gets these millions of viewers and it's incredibly popular. But I thought, when I spoke to the execs about this, about giving it a fresh lick of paint, and that's, doing a bit more handheld, and, making the performances sort of slightly more lived in, and not grounded, because I'm not taking anything away from the performance, but just trying to get even better performances. And like I did another one where we did in this it was in episode 2, where there was a suspect who's like leaving a hotel room, and she looks out on the balcony and the police are down there, and she runs through this kind of like squalid kind of flat, and then we go to the top of the stairs, and one of them's come around the bottom there, and we throw a suitcase down. And that just came to me when I was reading the script. And sometimes it's an efficiency thing. You think, I could do this from 20 different angles, or I could be with the suspect who's doing this thing. And they said, we've never done that before on the show. And it was weird, because even outside the set, the hotel, sorry, the police station on the island, they always walk up the same steps. They always park the cars on the same side. And I worked out that the dialogue, there wasn't enough dialogue for them to go all the way up the steps. And there's another set of steps on the other side. And I said, well, can we just go up there? And it was like you'd suddenly said, can we shoot this in Latin? And it was like, no one's ever done that before. And I was like, just a set of stairs. And it came from a practical thing, is that, and they said, yeah, actually, if you're actually on this side, you can see this kind of corner of the cliffs in the background. And it wasn't like me trying to sort of shake it up too much. I mean, there was a few things where I thought, I want to make the manhunt feel like it's handheld and got more energy in it, and a bit less. You don't know what the camera's going to do, a bit more unpredictable. And the more the episode goes on, it starts to become more conventional. And that's just, I like having a nice pace to the edit, not to overcut things. It's always about who's, what the shot's about, and who's it about. But sometimes you watch stuff and you just think there's a rhythm off here. Like for me, being the editor thing, it's like every scene's got a heartbeat, and that how fast it is and slow it is, and that's the rhythm of what people are and what do you feel like you want to see. And a lot of time it's just an instinctual thing. It's not like we've been on that shot for 2 seconds, let's cut to something else. So I employed that with Death in Paradise and all the shows I do. And touch wood, I been called Steve No Notes Hughes a lot of time, because I've had note sessions where there's never any notes, because I sort of know what our producers want to get out of it. And that if we've had the discussion beforehand, sometimes it's like they'll say, can you hold on that shot for a bit longer at the end, so someone looks pensive at the end. But there's never any kind of massively complicated. But it was a really enjoyable job. And Ralph was great to work with, and we had some great guest cast. A really good DP called Banny Mendy, who was new to the show, and just to kind of make it feel like the same show, but 2.0.
Yeah, and in thinking of the idea of simple but elegant, there's also one particular shot in that first step of season 13, and it's when Commissioner Patterson is sitting at home, and you have this slow pull out, and he just gets smaller and smaller in the frame.
Well, heartbreakingly, that shot went on for ages, and it was I was so proud of it, but it was such an action-packed story and so much incident that it went on. I mean, I think it ended up being about 23 seconds, but the actual shot was about 45, because it went all the way outside through the doors. So he was literally a tiny little spot. And all right, maybe it was sort of slightly indulgent. And also, it was trying to get the pace of it right, because you didn't want to zip back like you're on a roller coaster, but you also didn't want to, you don't think, God, I get the point of this already. But it felt like there was a natural point to come out. But yeah, it's that visual storytelling. You kind of think, well, I could do what he's watching on the TV. I could do a close with this and do that. But it was about sort of making this kind of very proud, strong man, think about being, he's mortal, and he's lonely and vulnerable, and you just it's common sense a lot of the time. It's an instinctual thing. You read something, you think, well, that's going to tell that story, and it's quite reasonably easy to shoot. But yeah, introducing a few of those things, so it isn't just covering a scene, and that you go, here's your 2 shots and singles, and that you think, well, how can I sometimes maybe have less shots and still tell the same story? Like Danny Boyle says that brilliant thing about when you're directing, that you want to shoot a scene in as fewer shots as you possibly can, and you don't need an eye line for every single thing all the time. There's an elegance in the way you tell stories, and I think that sometimes there's a fear when you're doing television that it's like you didn't get 30 shots that day, and you say, no, but I got 20 really, really good shots, and it's more important for me to do that. So yeah, it's all stuff you get with experience. Like, I've made all the same mistakes as we all make, but that's how you learn. It's the best way to learn, is by making mistakes.
I definitely want to come back and pull on that mistakes thread, but I will come to that maybe next. When you go onto a show, again, like Death in Paradise, which you're coming in season 13. Cast are established as much as, you know, they kind of change every couple of seasons. Did you, and it's not necessarily specific to that show, but in any episodic TV, sometimes directors can come in and maybe find some resistant performers because we are the blow-ins and you're only there for a block and you may never be back, and they can be quite maybe protective of who they're playing and maybe not trust you initially quite as much. Do you have any, how do you approach resistant performers if you encounter them? Or maybe it is just the same principles as you already touched on, which is that idea of building trust.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you work with, I've had experiences with kind of tricky actors, and generally, when you start, you'll ask. It's always good to ask other directors who've worked on the show if you know them, and you sort of say, "What's this person like? What's that person like?" And they'll say, "They're really good, but they're not good until take 8, or they never learn the lines, or they're great, great. You've got nothing to worry about there." So you do a bit of homework before you actually start, and even speak to the producers. Sometimes, you have a job, and someone will say, "How are you working with, difficult actors?" And a lot of the time, it's working with sort of slightly more trickier actors. Is that it's like they haven't done the homework sometimes, so that they act out a little bit and try and deflect and put the blame somewhere, or that they are very stubborn and they feel like that's the only way they want to do it. And even though I'm incredibly flexible, like there might be a reason why it has to be this way. And sometimes you do get pushback from actors, and not to take it personally a lot of the time, because they've they might have done the show for years before you've done it. But my approach generally when you come in is to listen first rather than going in all guns blazing, or ideally have a kind of cup of tea with them beforehand. And when you get on the set with, especially when I've worked with more established actors, I come in and I just say, "How do you like to work? And do you like notes, or do you like to be left alone?" Or and most of the time they'll say, "Yeah, oh no, I love notes. Give me direction." But there are a few who say, "Well, you know, I'm happy just to be left alone." And you're going to go, "Great." And you're there then only to say, "Could you be another step to your left so we can get some depth there?" And if they're giving you gold, then why change it? But if you're working with some actors who are difficult in that they don't really, sometimes the actors get bored on shows and they start acting up a little bit, and you have to take a bit of crap off them sometimes. But I've never had any like really awful experiences. I've had actors who just stubborn and didn't want to do what you've asked because there might be a reason why. You might have a stunt sequence and it's all planned out in advance, and you can't allow them just to sort of wander around and do whatever they want. Whereas if it's a kind of dialogue scene with two people behind a desk, you can say you can be on whichever side of the desk you want. It's over to you, whatever you think, unless you've got something very specific in mind. But yeah, it's good to sort of speak to them and then speak to the producer if you feel like someone is you're not getting on with someone. But those experiences are few and far between. Like most actors are really happy to be there and are very good at what they do. And sometimes you work with some absolute kind of gems, and you think, I'd love to work with you on every job. And sometimes you're with people and you kind of go, "I really hope I never get to work with you again." But obviously I can't name names, but there's been a handful of people over the years, and it's, I think that's getting less and less now. I think people are being found out for being kind of hard work, and you need people who are going to get on. You work with a producer and someone say, "What about this actor?" And they'll say, "Oh no, I know someone who's worked with him, or he's hard work," and you're going to go, "That person's not going to get work." So it's important to get on with people as well. But yeah, it's there's far more good, nice actors than there are kind of tricky ones.
I would agree as well. In terms of Death in Paradise, you mentioned your guest cast, and again, kind of just backtracking to your work, kind of workshopping with new actors, bring them into the industry. I thought the guest cast were brilliant. Try to get this name right. Mensa Bediako
Yes,
played
Mensa, yeah.
Fulton in your first step, and again, I think the performance was brilliant. And I was wondering what hand you have in the casting process on a show like that, and how you go about casting supporting roles, and yeah, what you're looking for, like in terms of tapes or meeting with performers?
Well, on Death in Paradise, I mean, some of the bigger names we had, like Hayley Mills, who was amazing and as gorgeous as what you'd expect, and Kathy Tyson, who I've worked with before, and some of the more established actors, they will just tend to be offered, and it's because it's a show that is famous for having kind of some bigger name actors, and there's a kitsch factor to some of them, and some of the bigger names will just be offers. They'll just put an offer in, and whether they're free or they'll do it for the money or whatever, whether they like the show. So you're involved in that conversation, but those conversations, usually the execs will have like the final say, and then for the kind of like the lesser known parts of those, sometimes like the other guest parts, the supporting guest parts, you will you speak to the casting agent and you say, I want someone who feels like this type of performer, or it's never really like a look. You don't want to say I want someone who looks like this person, but you'll say I want someone who's kind of simmering with anger, or is sympathy, who can play sympathetic as well as kind of angry in the character that Mensa played, Alton. And I think we had about four tapes that came in, and there were two of them who were fantastic, and we all decided that Mensa was the best, and he was great. He was great. I had a phone call with him before we started, and we talked about what the tone of it was. It's a very different episode. We actually see who the kind of the bad guy is in the start of the episode, and just how to layer that up and make it feel more ambiguous at first, and that he's quite tortured, and we like the idea of him wearing these glasses and stuff, and he sort of reminded me a little bit of like something like Samuel L. Jackson would play in like Changing Lanes or something. Some guy who's had these events unfold, and that he finds himself in this situation, and he was like the sweetest guy, Mensa, and he was like this kind of really articulate theater actor with like but like with the body of like a bodybuilder, and it was so bizarre, and he was like and he was very thoughtful, and there wasn't a lot of back and forth. Like I'd say, I'm looking for this from the scene, and this is what I'm thinking, and he would go, okay, and then he would just do it. He never hopefully it was what I was saying was making sense, but I never felt that like some people like what sometimes you get a bit of verbal diarrhea when you're working with people. Like I worked with Steve Pemberton on Midsomer Murders, and I'm a massive League of Gentlemen fan, and I got completely starstruck, and I was going throughout the whole day, and it wasn't making any sense. At the end of the day, I said, "I'm really sorry, Steve." I said, "You didn't get the best of me today." I said, "I'm just really starstruck." I said, "I'm a massive fan of Inside Number 9 and the stuff that you do." Um, but on Death in Paradise, yeah, you tend to, what you get on, and not just Death in Paradise, but a lot of those shows, is the bigger names get offered, and the sort of they can't, the sort of slightly smaller parts, or the lesser known kind of actors will kind of do a self tape. Sometimes you kind of come in and do an in room meeting, and that's slowly coming back on again now. Obviously, after the pandemic, things are much better now. But yeah, you would tend to see about four people, between 4 to 6 people for a part, and then you go to the producer, and you present them to the exec, and the exec says, "Yep, happy with that." And 9 times out of 10, you get your way.
I have to say, he was a brilliant piece of casting, and you mentioned he was a very sweet guy, but maybe there was just a lot of himself that he was able to bring into that character, as he said, especially knowing from the get go who the killer is.
Yes. And I was really impressed with I had Sean McGuire, who was a soap star and pop star for years. He was actually in the very first episode, and we had some. We clicked from the start. I mean, I was winding him up because it looked like his costume. He looked like Alan Partridge, and we all through the day I was giving him Alan Partridge quotes, and thankfully we were pretty much the same age and families and that kind of stuff, and we would talk about it, and where we could try and make to dig in a bit deeper, because we had a big as the episodes always end without any spoilers, there's a sort of a denouement where we find out who the killer is, and when people confess and stuff, and that when it was Sean's turn to do his part in that scene, we talked about just making it messier and less like the script was great, but like to lean into it more and make it feel sorry for him in a little way. He's a guy who's made a lot of bad decisions. He's not this kind of scheming villain. It's not black and white, and that you almost sort of feel sorry for him, that he's just made a series of really bad choices, and that he thought, if I did this one more thing, I drew this line in the sand, then that will be the end of it. And then another line in the sand, and he looks back and he's forgotten where he started from. And just giving him the time to give the performance. Like whenever I'm shooting with actors, I always I'll get what I need. I don't shoot loads of takes of actors. I'll tend to sort of do 2 or 3 takes, and then I'll always say one more for safety. And I always encourage the actors as well to say, look, if there's anything you want to sort of tweak a little bit or go off script a bit more on this one, I've got what I need. So it's a free swim. You can do what you want. And sometimes you get some real gems in there. And often those are the stuff that kind of get left in the program, because it's like if you're on a driving test and you bump the pavement and you think, oh, sorry, I failed now, I'm just going to drive normally. And all that fear goes. You know, when you say to an actor, I've got what I need, I'm happy, but let's have one more, let's see what happens. And Sean's scenes were really, really good for that. And, you know, we've become really good friends, and that I wanted to do that with all the performances, that they all feel more you know, instead of just performing them the way you would do it in a normal episode of Death in Paradise, is that you try and say, well, what's behind this? Why has he made these decisions? And or say, you know, you remind me of this character in this film, or we'd watch that film together, or watch this clip of someone. And you know, it gets people excited as well. It isn't just a job that you kind of clock in and you shoot. If you can be excited and get them fired up, and it's great, you know, and it's great to be able to work with actors again. And I'd work with you know, Mensa and Sean again in a heartbeat.
You've shot second unit on some shows like Killing Eve and Treadstone.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, what were those experiences like, and what were the takeaways from them?
I've loved shooting second unit on the shows I've worked on. I mean, Killing Eve was one of the first ones I did. Like I think the producers were looking for someone who could do a bit of action, and because I'd done a lot of action on Casualty as well, I specifically got an action reel with all of that kind of stuff on it. So they saw that and really liked it. And I went in and met the producer, and we had to talk about tone. And you know, I was privy to all the scripts, and I went and watched some of the shooting, and I met the cast. And what was really exciting on that was that on some second unit jobs, you go in and you're just there to get like a computer screen or a car driving past or a GV of a building. But I did like a big chunk of, I think it was episode 4 in series 1, where there's a character, I think he's called Frank, who's being chased by Villanelle, and Eve is waiting in the car. And this was for an episode directed by a really amazing, experienced director called John East, and he'd storyboarded everything. And he said, well, you know, feel free to put your spin on things, and if you feel like something's you can get better, then do that. And it was really fun because you kind of, everyone knows what you're doing there. You know, you're there to sort of pick up the slack, and you know, you come in and you still have a full unit. I mean, it was a massive unit that we had, and you know, I was working with the main cast, and even though you kind of come in and it's a bit more superficial, you know, it's hello, and you know, I was working with Sandra Oh, and you know, I was a big fan of Sideways, which she was in, and other films. And not that you go in there and kiss ass, but it was genuine. I would say, like, you know, I think you're a fantastic actor, and really looking forward to working with you. And from what I've read of the scripts, and I thought this sounds right up my alleyway, and I really enjoyed that. But then obviously I'm not involved in the edit, so you shoot it and you hand it off to somebody else. And I was happy with the way it was all put together. And then with Treadstone, a good director friend of mine called Jeremy Webb, who I met when we were both doing Doctor Who in 2011, who's gone off and had the career I dreamed I would have. He's off doing things like The Last of Us, and I'm really proud because he's a great guy and a really good director. And he was working over in Eastern Europe, and he said, I'm working on this spin-off of the Bourne series, a TV show, and I'm a massive Bourne fan. And he said, we want someone to come in and do some second unit. Again, it's sequences, it's big stunt sequences and stuff. And I spoke to the producer and how I'd like to, you know, to work. And I had to join the DGA to be able to do it, because I was working with American actors and the crew and that kind of stuff. So I had to pay to join the DGA to do the job. But the rates in America are so much better than in the UK. The 2 weeks that I worked on the show doing second unit stuff paid for me to join the DGA and paid for a small holiday. It was like it's a very different world. But what was great about Treadstone was I had 2 days to this big action sequence with a stunt coordinator, a guy called Buster, hilariously, who was like played Batman, the stunt double for Batman in the Christopher Nolan movies. And he basically sort of, I think, because he wasn't allowed to direct the actors, like I needed him to do the action, but we ended up sort of doing it both anyway. So like, I would offer stuff and suggest stuff, and we had 2 days in this nightclub over in Eastern Europe. I think it was in Prague, and you have all the kit there. That's what was different on the American productions, is that if we needed overtime, then you could pay for the overtime. It wasn't like over here, it's like you've got to finish at 7 o'clock. It's like they'll pay everybody for an hour, because these shows are like millions of dollars an episode, whereas over here we don't have that for the most part. But like if I was to suddenly say, can I have a Steadicam's waiting there to go, I haven't had to sort of arrange that in advance, or I want a crane, or I want this, then I mean, the most amazing kind of thing on that show was that I had a scene where we had a character who had to get from one place to another. They shot him in these 2 locations, and they just wanted a bridging shot with a car going down a street that's like a kind of country road. And it was all set in America, even though it was shot in Prague. And they said, we're going to give you a morning to shoot this shot. I was like, a morning? It's like literally someone gone past on a motorbike. And they said, how many cars? So they showed me this road. It was like what we call like a road to nowhere. It's like it's ours to be able to. We've blocked it off at one end and another. And first they said we're gonna cut all the grass on this field. So they literally cut this whole thing down, so it felt like more like an American field. They put up all of these street signs. We were obviously driving on the other side of the road, so they changed all of the markings on the road. They said, how many cars do you want on the road? And with my experience of doing over here, I'd say 4, 6, and they said, we can probably get you like 30. I thought, literally just a car driving on a road. And then the production designer said, well, I've done a study, and basically in this area of America where we're shooting, it's mostly black and gray cars. So are you okay for like 25 black and 15 gray? And I was like, yeah, great. And then, you shoot the scene, and then it wouldn't even end up in the show because they've got that much resources, and they can, it's not waste, but what it is that they can do everything, and they can get all the ingredients they want. They can literally take the whole supermarket into the kitchen and make whatever they want then. Whereas like sometimes we're going to a sort of slightly more like a Tesco Express, and you get everything you think you need. Not always everything you want. Like the Rolling Stone song says, you get what you get what you need, not what you want. And so it just feels like, and like, I had a driver there, not that that's important. I had a nice suite, and you treated really well. And but second unit things are really good opportunities for newer directors. Sometimes it doesn't happen that much over here, but sometimes there is a second unit who will go out and shoot some extra scenes that there's not enough time to schedule, and it's only 1 or 2 actors. And the best way you kind of get onto that kind of stuff is if you kind of get to know a director, or you reach out to a producer, or if you can cut an action reel, if you've got anything that's action based. And people will think, well, we want somebody who can do a shootout, who can do all the close-ups of the guns and the bullet hits and that kind of stuff. And we've shot with the principals, and you're going to shoot with some stunt people. And it's really good because like on my CV, I've got Killing Eve, I've got Treadstone, I've got Strike Back, and all these kind of really exciting things. And even though I was only on them for a couple of weeks, there's a big takeaway, because you get the kudos of those shows and working with these actors and putting it on your show reel.
Amazing, and an entirely different world of DGA show.
Yes.
And DA fees are not cheap.
No, I was very surprised and happy with how much you get paid on a big American show. It's it's a completely different world. I went over to the States, and a friend of mine was producing a show over there, and I was chatting to one of the directors, and I said, how much do you get paid for this show? And she said, oh, I prep for 4 days, I shoot 5 days, and I have 2 days in the edit. So I said, so what's that, 11 days? I said, how, for like a half an hour show. And I said, so you're only on it for 11 days. And I said, you must have to like get lots of gigs a year. And this is going back about 5 years ago. And she said, I said, oh, if you don't mind me asking, how much do you get paid? And she said, well, that's like $36,000 for like 11 days. And you think, wow, if I did 2 of those in a year, that's sort of like what, you can, what a good working director, a busy working director earns in a year. But there's a lot of it's quite tricky to kind of get to break at the States as well. Like, I mean, I had an American agent, and just couldn't quite get there. I mean, I'm still haven't given up hope, and I've got my DGA membership, which is great. But some people will get like a fast track to do it because they'll work on a really successful show, and it just lightning in a bottle. And then for a lot of us, we're working directors, and we were like kind of tradespeople, or like I said, like chef, you come in, you do the job, and you're on to the next one. Some people see it as a sort of a career, and I would never do that show because of this or that. But for a lot of us, we're working directors. You know, you're journeymen. You kind of come and you do a job, and you're looking for the next job, and you're always jumping from one sinking ship to another. And you know, you it's scary when you think I've got 2 weeks left in post and I've got nothing to go on to, and you know, I've got the bills to pay. So that's why sometimes you have to take a money job. But second unit is a really good opportunity for new directors to kind of get their foot in the door. Um, but it's not as much. There's not a lot of it in the UK as much as what people think. But if you can get onto one of those shows, then it's absolutely worth doing.
I think you struck on something there that is an important part of directing, which is that it can be hard. Um, and I was going to ask what has been or what do you think is the most difficult thing about being a director or a working director, or what has been the hardest lesson for you to learn?
A lot of the time, it's boring stuff like getting paid on time, and because it's very rare that you go from one job to another. You know, it happens sometimes, and that some people book you for a block back to back, but you know, sometimes the dates don't work out, and uh, you know, you sometimes have to turn a really good job down because you can't afford to be out of work for that amount of time. And there are some people who are lucky enough to be independently wealthy, where you can say, well, I can be out of work for 6 months and not worry about it, because you know, TV directing work is nicely paid, but you don't get paid that for all year round, and that you may come away with a job with, you know, some money in the bank, but if you don't work for 2 months, 3 months, that money that you've kind of saved is going to get to live on, and that's a side of the thing that people don't talk about enough. Like, it's great to have this amazing job and tell stories and work with amazing actors and travel to. I've worked all over the world, but the thing that's stressful is real life as well. It's just getting around that thing of thinking like, you know, I need to make this money last. At the end of the day, it's a job, and it's an amazing job, but it's still a job nonetheless. And you have to meter your expectations that, you know, it's very rare that you're going to work all the time. And usually, the further you go up the ladder on the bigger, more higher end dramas, the less you work. You get paid more, but the gaps are you know, longer between each of them. And that some directors who will start out get trapped in a soap or a continuing drama thing, which is not great, because some producers and execs look down on that kind of stuff. There's like a stigma attached to them, which is really unfair, because you know, we work our asses off on those shows, and give us the opportunity to work on any of those bigger shows, and we would like chew our left foot off. It's like, it's, you know, we're hungry for it to show you what we can do. But that is, as well, is that, you know, there's some parts of the industry who are sniffy about some of the shows that you work on. And like a producer, someone told me once about they were looking to hire a first AD for something, and the producer looked at his list of credits and said, look, but he's moved from this show to that show, and he's gone backwards and sideways, and then he's in a kid show. He's got no career plan. And this person says to them, he's got a family to pay the bills. Like, it's not a lot of us. Some people do, and best of luck to them. But for a lot of us, we've got to pay the bills every month, and that, you know, I said the money's good, but it's not good to sustain you throughout the whole year. You know, you have to be clever about how you're gonna last. And you know, like I said earlier, like, that side of life is the stuff that I find kind of stressful. It's like taking care of my family and wanting to have a good life. The work part is mostly fun. You know, it's like, you know, you learn stuff and you make mistakes and you work with your heroes and you see who people really are, and you know, you see images on screen, you think, I'm gonna use that, you know, on my show reel. And you know, I've managed to complete that impossible day. How the hell did we do that? It's because I was prepared and I was flexible, and there's a million things you learn. But for me, there is a big part of it's like, it's real life as well. It isn't all premieres and, you know, glitzy things and that. People think when you say, oh, you work in TV, that it's this glamorous lifestyle and you go to premieres. It's not. It's like I'm getting up at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm you know, got scripts to read tonight, or I've got a really big 7-page day tomorrow. But I'm not worried about that stuff, because I know that I'm experienced enough to be able to shoot it.
Yeah, there's massive misconceptions about working in film or telly, particularly from a monetary perspective. But you mentioning the idea of people thinking it's glamorous. I remember years ago bringing my nanny to set, and she was super excited about being on set. And we popped her in some scenes in McCoy's, which is the pub in Fair City. 30 minutes in, like, she was bored out of her mind, realizing that what the day actually looks like. Um, and it was really funny. Anyway, I digress. You mentioned in there making mistakes. So I just wanted to jump back to that. And again, to try not go too broad, but is there one or two mistakes that you have made over the years that were kind of like key learning moments for you?
Yeah, I've got two things that so one of them is when you give notes and scripts in your prep process is that I'm I'm like the logic police. Like when I'm doing my scripts, I want them to be watertight because I don't want to be on set and an actor says to me, but I wouldn't, that doesn't happen. And then you're going to go, well, just say it because it says on the script. You know, it's good that it makes sense and that you know when you're doing drama, there's there's reality and then there's drama and there's sort of an area of fudge between the two. I'm happy to be in the fudge area where you kind of go, well, it could happen, or it's not out of the realms of possibility. But um, I sometimes have found myself, and I don't mean to, but like I can be a bit honest when I'm giving notes. Sometimes I try not to be sarcastic, but sometimes you'll work on something where the script just doesn't make any sense and it's terrible. And because a lot of jobs, you don't always get to read the scripts before you start, and there's been certain jobs where you read them and I will give like 12 pages of notes and I try and be nice in them, but like sometimes you just think this doesn't make any sense, and you think you're being nice, but people have feelings as well, and that I've been told sometimes that I'm too logical. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think I'm not asking for it all to be like insanely like watertight and that kind of stuff, but sometimes you just go that just wouldn't happen. Like a couch can't turn into a suitcase and like as a transformer and then become a carpet salesman. You're gonna go, that's just, it doesn't make any sense. Um, and but it's tricky because you're often brought in so late. Um, that couch has already been cast as Vin Diesel, and that's all happened further down the line, and you can't change a block of flats into a bungalow. Again, also like a chef, like a director's like an interior designer on a lot of the shows that I do. You get brought in so late that the structure's already there, and you're just there to sort of be an interior decorator. You're going to paint the walls, you're going to change the fittings and everything. You might change a door, the carpets, but you're not going to change a block of flats into a bungalow. So I'm sort of still learning on trying to not let, and it's a piece of entertainment sometimes, and that not to be too tough on the script editors when look, I'm super nice when I do it. I'm never aggressive or anything like that, but I can write a lot of notes to say, but if we solve this now, then we don't have to worry about it later. And it's like a roadmap. We know exactly where we're going. It's like having a sat nav. Otherwise, people just say, "Can you go from here to Scotland?" And you go, "Well, how do I get from here to there?" And if we've worked it all out, it's much easier. Um, Another one is like I did some pickups on a show last year for a Channel 5 show, which hasn't come out yet, and I was trying to be. I'm usually pretty good with my times throughout the day, that I try and stay on time. And I spotted something that I really wanted to shoot, and I thought I had time to do it. And the crew were like, "Oh, we have to get here before the sun goes down." And in my head, sometimes I'm thinking fast on what the crew are, so I think, well, it's only going to take 20 minutes to do this and 10 minutes to do that. And I've got a good sense of timing of how long it's going to take, and I misjudged it. And we went to this next location and we lost the light, and I've never ever had that. And we had to light from one side. I mean, I managed to get the side looking towards the exterior where there was still some light in the sky, but I was kicking myself afterwards because I like taking risks. I like to be bold, but it really wasn't worth it because the stuff that I risked it for wasn't worth the price that I paid for it. So I think it's just being aware of like when to take those risks, and it's great to be bold. Like I did on a Langirls episode, World War II thing. I wanted to do this thing with these women walking down this country lane, and there's a Messerschmitt plane coming towards them, and it's firing all these guns at them. And I wanted to get the women, the bullets, and the plane all in the frame at the same time. And we only had one take at it because it was a very low budget show. We only had one pass on the bullets. So I had three cameras, so I had one camera behind the two actresses, the bullets in a line down the middle of them, ahead of them in this field, and a plane coming up, and the plane had to land up absolutely perfectly. But I covered myself by doing a separate cutaway of the bullet strafing the floor, so I could double them up if I needed it, and a separate shot. I think it was on the plane as well, and it worked brilliantly. But I covered myself, whereas on this job I didn't. I stupidly thought I'm gonna oh, we'll be fine. You know, like I was trying to be positive and sort of say, I can do it. I've got you safe. And, you know, and it was the first time I can remember where I risked and my numbers didn't work out. And even though we still got the scene and it worked, no one would ever know. It could have looked much better if I had not done this, if I'd not gambled it earlier. So that's it really. I mean, you know, but you still learn all the time. You know, you always, you know, you know, I think you learn from your mistakes and things like, you know, you kind of go, well, if I start the scene looking this way, then when we come back around to do the reverse, that can be the first scene looking that way, and I'm only shooting that way for that scene, so I've saved the time of the turnaround. Whereas if I'd started the wrong way around, I'd be adding an extra move. That's another 15 minutes. So you're just having that time management thing going on. You learn kind of shortcuts and where to save the time, and we can get this step this actor off here while I get this cutaway, or there's a makeup change for 20 minutes. Let's get the cutaway on the phone while I'm waiting for that. You know, it's a lot of it is about time saving. But yeah, we all make mistakes, and that's the best way to learn. Like I know next time, you know, not to risk something over something that was stupid that I probably, you know that I used in the edit, but it just wasn't as interesting as what it wasn't worth the price that I paid.
Every day is a school day, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, doing this 20 years, and I still feel like you learn something every day, you know, uh, and the day you stop learning is the day, you know, you should give up, because you know you're always looking. Like I said earlier, you know, I watch lots of behind the scenes things, and you know, you see how things are made and broken down, and you know, you read scripts and you think, oh, how much information's there, and you know, you're always learning stuff, and how, you know, to work with a stunt coordinator, and that it's good for a director to know a bit about everybody's job. So you can explain to that in their terms, and know if someone's lying, if someone's saying to you, oh no, I can't do that, and you can go, well, if you did this instead, that'd be fine, and they go, oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you're always learning every day.
Couldn't agree more. The last thing I have for you then, you mentioned earlier kind of reading books, particularly about working with actors and watching different clips. I was going to ask you if you have any particular recommendations on resources, or like, is there a book that, you know, I love this one impacted me greatly?
There was a really good book called I'll Be in My Trailer, and it's written by John Badham, the director who did Saturday Night Fever and War Games and Short Circuit. And it's a collection of him speaking to lots of directors about their experiences with actors, and what some of it's like, you know, it's just kind of not gossipy, but like anecdotes about how certain things happen. But that was really good. There's a really amazing book out by a director called Ed Zwick, who did Glory, another amazing movie, and we did Legends of the Fall. I just listened to the audiobook, and it gives a lot of examples of how he works with actors and what he's asking for, and he's really honest about the failings and where things didn't work. And those are two really good things. Obviously, they're in book form, but I like listening to the audiobooks. And then I watch a lot of David Fincher making of things online, and you see how he talks to people, and you know, you hear the horror stories about him doing 70 takes, but supposedly that's not exactly true. Someone said that it's not 70 takes of the same shot a lot of the time. It's like in that scene they did 70 setups, 70 passes. Like they may have done 12 shots of the wide shot or whatever, and 5 of this. It's like, because even though he's working on this huge scale, nobody can do 70 setups on a feature would take days, and they would never get anywhere. But yeah, do a search for any kind of David Fincher things online, and there's lots of videos. I mean, you listen to Paul Thomas Anderson talk about things, how he works with actors, and because he's one of my favorite directors as well. There's a really good Spielberg documentary which was on HBO, just called Spielberg, and what his relationships are with actors. It's literally just do a search on YouTube. Those 2 books, Hits, Flops, and I forget the last word in the Ed Zwick title is, but then there's also I'll Be in My Trailer, which is just a really fantastic book about working with actors and also all aspects of directing. It's just really honest. I think that's the best way for you to learn, is people to be honest about stuff. It's like, yeah, I made a mistake there, or it's the best way how you get through it in the end of the day, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And Steve Hughes, I would like to thank you very much for being as honest as you have been.
That's all right. I really enjoyed it, Jason. It's nice because I know as a director yourself, and sort of only a few steps behind me on the ladder is that you're going to encounter all this stuff as well. And I think it's good to share, advice and help people. There's a kind of healthy competitiveness about it, but we are all a huge family, and we all do the same job. And it's good that we all share information because like you say, that's how we learn. And you learn from my mistakes, and then you pass that on, and we just get better storytellers all the time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the future as well.
And that is a wrap on Steve Hughes. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you are enjoying the show, please share it with a friend, or follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, if you have feedback, questions, or topics you'd like me to cover on the show, please put them in the comments section on our Instagram page at the Filmmakers Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director, and you can find Steve on Instagram. He is one of my favourite handles, at Movie Goblin. Links and social media handles are posted in the show notes. Join me next week when I talk to the brilliant actor Emmett Scanlon. Until next time.